So welcome back to Taking Charge of My Cancer, episode 37. And I have a wonderful guest today, Danna Haggett. So Danna is an oncology nurse practitioner, taking care of patients undergoing breast cancer treatment at Mass General Cancer Center in Boston, Massachusetts. Her work with the patient population started back in 2007 when she worked as a clinical research coordinator on the breast cancer clinical trials at MGH. In her 2 years as a clinical research coordinator, she was inspired by the nurses and the nurse practitioners with whom she worked to return to school to get a second bachelor's and master's degree in nursing. She returned back to Mass General in 2016 and began working with breast cancer patients undergoing radiation before switching to the breast medical oncology team in late 2019. In her free time, Danna enjoys cycling or running to benefit cancer-related nonprofits and spending time with her mini Bernedoodle, who I just met, who is adorable, and his name is Elton John, which I love it. So, Danna, thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Durley. I'm so excited to be here with you. I've really enjoyed listening to your podcast and getting to know the guests that you've interviewed.
Okay, great. Awesome. So you kind of already, what is your mission? Like, I know you guys doing a wonderful survivorship program, which I had the pleasure to interview Dr. Commander not long ago. And I'm like, oh my God, we gotta reproduce your program right here at UF. So tell me, what is your mission right now?
Yeah. So I am so lucky that I get to work with someone as energetic as Dr. Amy Commander. And so I partner with her and a couple other colleagues, a nurse colleague, Elizabeth Abraham, a physician colleague, Dr. Stephanie Eisenstadt, and then a social worker. Her name is Kirsten. And then a psychiatrist just joined our team as well, Dr. April Hirschberg. And so we have 3 different groups that we've broken into, and we do this survivorship program called Paving the Path to Wellness for Breast Cancer Survivors. And it focuses on the pillars of lifestyle medicine, specifically healthy eating, physical activity, trying to work on stress management, avoiding risky businesses, getting quality sleep, and the importance of maintaining social connections and relationships. So I'm one of the nurse practitioner teammates, and I think I bring a unique view because I've had the opportunity to work as a nurse practitioner taking care of patients undergoing radiation, but also more recently, patients that are on either endocrine therapy or going through chemotherapy or immunotherapy. And I've always had a real strong interest in survivorship. And so I've been so lucky that I've shared this with people and they've remembered that. And so they got me plugged in with Dr. Commander. I think it was in September of 2020 when I first joined for her paving program at that time.
That's amazing. So if we kind of go back, I know that you started your path when you were a researcher. Well, you ever were planning to do this? What happened with your life before you ended up being in the breast cancer research?
Yeah, so my journey in college was that, or actually even back up to high school, I had always really liked the sciences. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to major in biology and I'll do pre-med because I think I want to go to medical school. And the college that I went to was a liberal arts college, and they also had a foreign language requirement. And I grew up in a school system where we were taking Spanish classes probably from second grade. And so I had always taken Spanish, and I was pretty far along. And so I was like, all right, I'll just take my language requirement with Spanish. Turns out freshman year, I loved the time in the Spanish class and I didn't love the time in the biology lab. So I decided to switch gears. I stayed pre-med, so I was taking the other biology prerequisites and chemistry courses and calculus, all those fun classes. But I was able to expand and do more like language classes, but then also learn about the Spanish culture. And I was able to study abroad my junior year of college, which was incredible. I was over in Spain. So I did gain fluency in Spanish, which has been super helpful in taking care of my patients. But the best advice that I got was my senior year in college, I wasn't ready to apply to medical school. I talked to my pre-med advisor and he said, if you know you don't want to go to medical school or you're not sure about it, why don't you go work in a hospital, work with different healthcare providers so that you can see what other professions there are. So I got a job at Mass General. I was doing breast cancer research with so many of the physicians that I work with now and some of the nurse practitioners that I work with now. And I actually remember very vividly sitting in the nurse manager's office, and she kind of helped guide me down the nursing route rather than like going to PA school. And I will forever be indebted for that guidance, because I think nursing really speaks to my personality. Some of the nurse practitioners that I worked with back in 2007 to 2009, they're people that I was looking up to at that time. I now work alongside them. I still look up to them. And it's been really fun to reconnect.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So I did one of those accelerated second degree programs for nursing. So if you have a bachelor's degree in something else, it takes about different programs take different time, but mine was about 16 months. And then I graduated, started working as a surgical oncology nurse, taking care of patients post-operatively from their surgical procedures. And while I was doing that, I was also in school part-time, becoming a nurse practitioner. So it was a busy 5 years of going back to school, but I'm glad that I did it, and I'm glad I don't have homework anymore.
awesome. That's awesome. So will you give us 3 valuable tips that you learned about your journey that can be very helpful to our cancer patients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely think the one that comes to mind first is the importance of teamwork. So from a young age, I always was part of a team playing, group sports. And I think I know actually, I know I couldn't do the job that I do today without being able to lean on so many important team members. So those are my physician colleagues. Those are the other nurse practitioners that I work with. That's the nursing team that I work with. And then folks like you, like the physical therapists, especially when I was in radiation oncology, we were getting patients ready for their radiation treatment, and we have to make sure that they can, raise their arms over their head. And so really making sure those, for example, the mastectomy patients or the people who've had the axillary lymph node dissections, making sure they have good range of motion that got them in the proper position for radiation every day. The cancer center that I work at, we're also really lucky that we have a nutrition team with registered dietitians. So they have been such an important part of the team, because a lot of our breast cancer patients are so motivated, during diagnosis, after diagnosis, of trying to figure out ways that they can improve their nutrition.
Mhm.
Um, and then also collaborating with the social work team. We are so lucky. We've got 2 amazing social workers who also are very good friends of mine. And so I couldn't do my job without everybody on the team. Another tip that I've learned along the way is to have mentors, and people that you feel comfortable asking the questions that you might not have the answers to, or people that you look up to, so you can say, all right, I see that you're doing this one way. How can I model my practice, similar to that? So, we talked about Amy Commander, and you got to meet with her earlier. And so she's definitely a mentor along the way. I was so lucky in my time in radiation oncology. My supervising physician at the time, she took me under her wing, and she really taught me everything that I knew for my foundation in breast cancer management. So she has been a really great mentor along the way. And then, like I said, those nurse practitioners that I work with on a regular basis, they're the folks, we share offices. And so, we'll go and see a patient, and then we'll come back and be like, I just want to run this by somebody else. And so it's really nice to have that
Yep.
support. In the pandemic, it was tough because we went from all being on site to some people working remotely, some people being in the office. And so we kind of missed out on that good, like, sort of problem solving together. And then the last tip I would say is to speak up and to tell those mentors that you have, or the people that you're working with, like, what are the things that you're interested in, or what are your goals? And I speak from experience, because it was me saying, I'm really interested in survivorship. I'd love to do research. I'd love to get more involved. And it was a couple colleagues remembering that about me, and then plugging me in with Dr. Commander so that I could help her with the paving program.
Got you. How about for patients? Like on all this journey with patients, if you want to give 3 patients to the patients, what do you think?
Yeah,
You like the top?
yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I think I've learned in doing the paving program, and just so that the audience knows, the form for that is we do a Zoom meeting there about an hour and a half, and we do 12 sessions and focus on a different area of wellness each week. And so one of the common themes that comes up is sort of this idea of, just how hard it is to get this diagnosis, go through treatment, and kind of get your world rocked. And so An important thing I've learned from patients and try to, give back to them is the idea of giving yourself grace when you're going through all of this. Um, Taking care of women who are former, or not former, but someone who's been used to being so active and being able to go out to go for a really long run, and realizing, wow, I'm kind of deconditioned from the treatment that I've gone through, and the run that I was able to do today was actually more like a walk. And so just saying, you're recognizing, it's tough to not be able to do those things that you were doing before your cancer diagnosis, but also appreciating your body for being able to do what it was able to do that day. And so I like the idea as well of like the folks that are not exercising at baseline. And it's like, okay, well, even doing 5 minutes of exercise is going to be better than 0 minutes of exercise. So that idea of just being patient with yourself and sort of giving yourself grace. And sort of in line with that is the idea of, it's a little cliche to say, but I think it's helpful, is progress, not perfection.
I like
I
that.
think you like that. Oh, good.
I love.
I think, I mean, I'm definitely a type A person, and so I need to take my own advice. But I think a lot of patients too come from a place where they're used to being in control, and then they get this diagnosis and they have control of, unfortunately, so little. Even the schedule can be really, really tough. It's like, okay, well, you have to come in for radiation every morning or every afternoon, or with your chemo, if you're going to do the cold caps, we need you to come in for the early morning treatments because we have to reserve the machine for you. So you definitely have to realize that, unfortunately, some of those things that you're used to being able to control are now no longer within your within your control. And then the other thing I like, and someone said this in nursing school to me, I had always grown up knowing, everything in moderation. And then in nursing school, we added the second part of that, which everything in moderation, including moderation. And I like that idea. Yeah.
Yep.
I like that idea because when I'm talking to my patients about what are like their modifiable risk factors, as it relates to their breast cancer recurrence, it's focusing in on things like diet and exercise and avoiding risky substances like alcohol. So I think with that, some people get so worried and so worked up, and they're like, I am having a hard time just even figuring out what foods I can put in my body, because now I'm so scared that anything I put in my body might impact my cancer recurrence risk. And so I try to remind people, it's like, it's really important to make small changes. And right. So like if you're someone that's eating red meat every single night of the week, like let's try to start somewhere slow. And it's like, let's do meatless Mondays, and let's, make a small change that'll hopefully make a bigger, more sustainable change. And give it, keeping in mind too, like dessert. I think I am someone, I love sweets. I love ice cream in the summertime. And so I can, relate to my patients, and I say, listen, you can have ice cream on occasion. If you're having ice cream after every meal every day, like that's not the right thing. So that's where that idea of like, everything in moderation, including the moderation, comes from.
Yeah, I really like that. I come across that a lot with patients. Like we do a body composition, we do an in-body. So we really go a lot over skeletal muscle mass and, body fat mass, and how they need to modify that because the breast risk recurrence and the risk for lymphedema, right, increase as they have a BMI higher than 29. And then patients postmenopausal with PR positive. So, and then I say that to them. I say, we need to modify that. That doesn't mean that you are not going to have some treats here and there, right? So, and even, myself, like, after certain age, our metabolism is not the same. So no, I cannot have ice cream every night. But if my family wants it, I just do a little teaspoon, a little taste of it, and that's all I need, right? So for just the taste of it, and then I don't need to be having a cup of it. So I tell patients the same thing. It's like, you might want to start modify certain things, but if you're going for dinner because you're celebrating your birthday, just go eat whatever you want, right? It's a celebration, but just be conscious about certain things. So I'm glad that you guys are reinforcing that as well. How about your most painful lesson through your journey?
Yeah. So I guess at the risk of it sounding a little bit naive on my part of things, is just realizing that life is not fair. And nobody promised us that it would be, but I definitely think working in oncology, unfortunately, I have enough experiences where I'm like, wow, that's just really not fair that this is happening to this person at this time in their life. Um, None of us want anybody to have a cancer diagnosis, and I would wish I was meeting my patients for other reasons, and meeting them at a 5K for breast cancer survivors or something like that, not because I'm going to be taking care of them, but it's then also one of the most unfortunately special times in someone's life. And so I sort of think about how people will always remember like the labor and delivery nurses that took care of them when they were having a baby. I hope that maybe that's the impact that I have on somebody's life when they're going through cancer treatment. But so sort of like back to that idea of, like life not being fair is, people, we meet a lot of people that they're like, well, Dana, I was already eating all the right things and I was already exercising and I already didn't drink too much alcohol and I still got cancer. And that's just, it's really tough. It means don't stop doing all those things. Like it's still really important to do those things. And perhaps it's, putting your body in a better position to be able to recover from surgery, recover from chemotherapy and radiation. But a sad one that sticks with me is a young woman who I treated a couple of years ago, and while she was going through her cancer treatment, her young son was getting treated for his recurring cancer, and so it just felt like it was too much on somebody's plate at once, and so just trying to be as supportive as I could be, but also like I said before about the teamwork is like leaning on those other resources that we have too, and so I was able, fortunately, that in that situation, the patient's son was also being treated at Mass General, so I could connect with his treatment team and social workers, and so together we did our best to take care of this family during a really tough time.
Oh wow, yeah, that's rough. That's rough. And sometimes this, and I'm sure that you feel the same way. I have not going through any cancer myself, so sometimes I feel like in a disadvantage in a way talking to a patient. I kind of see how you feel. I feel how you feel because you have you get this all the time, right? You have not been on my shoes, right? And they're right. I haven't been in your shoes, but I get to see everybody who's going through your shoes day after day. So many of you got, many days a week. So you kind of learn from them in this, what they feel. And it just amazed me how strong patients are. Like, it's like I have a situation where I have a patient who she came for a pre-op with her husband. Then she comes back for the post-op. And then it's like, oh, what is your husband at? Oh, we just had his funeral 2 days ago. And I'm like, oh my God, like what, how are you here, right? Like I was thinking to myself, I'll be a mess. I will be canceling this appointment. And she's like, I need to move on, right? And I need to take care of my body. And that's why I'm here. And then I think she's still in that shock, right? Now we're like great friends and we talk about how in shock I was. I was like, I wanted to cry, but I couldn't cry because she was not really showing any emotion. I think again, she's still like in this kind of like cloud. She didn't know like, how to act. And now she's like recognizing like, yeah, like, oh wow, was that cold when I told you that? And I'm like, yeah. I was like, oh my God. And then you have patients who I have a patient now who has two small kids, husband don't live here, travels, only see each other once a month. And she's going to chemotherapy, radiation, had surgery, two small kids, taking care of everything, like single mom. Husband feel bad because cannot be here to support her, but he has to work. So it's just, and they just move on, right? So it's just really give me tons of strength and make me realize how sometimes, you just really don't, I don't pay attention to so many little things that maybe can happen around me because other people just go through so much that I'm like, I don't have anything to complain about, right? So really, it's amazing the strength people just really bring out when you're going through a situation like this.
Yeah, I think breast cancer patients are a really good example of that because so many of them are these young women that are wearing so many hats. They're moms, they're working full time, and they're then the patient, or maybe they're taking care of young kids, but they're also taking care of, their own parents. And so I totally agree with you that, seeing them kind of what all the things that they have on their plate, but seeing how resilient they are has been really, really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that you have that will be of value for our audience?
Yeah, so it actually just sort of popped up because what we were talking about is this idea of or to try to avoid this idea of comparative suffering. And so in the pandemic, I started listening to Brene Brown a good amount. And I don't know, I can't remember if anybody specifically gave Brene's podcast a shout out on your prior episodes, but she is a social worker by training, and she's just got some really great advice. And so she kind of taught me about this idea of comparative suffering, because I think, like you were saying, Julie, it's like, we might not be individually impacted by cancer, so we can't exactly empathize with our patients. But it also doesn't negate that how we're feeling too. So it's like, yeah, our patients are going through really hard things too, but we were also healthcare providers during the pandemic, and we were going into the hospital every day, and these were scary times for anybody. And so I did a bad job for myself. I was like, oh no, like, you're fine, Dana, you're fine. Like, and I was not doing my good, like, self-care things. And I was saying, well, what I'm going through, like, I get to go home and I'm healthy, but my patients, they're sick. And it's like, no, that, everybody's having a hard time. You have to, recognize and honor how you feel. And comparative suffering does not help anybody at all. So that just kind of popped into my head when we were
That's
talking.
awesome. Great. So that I'm going to put it in there for, like, I'm going to listen to it. Brene Brown podcast. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. She's fantastic. My uncle was the person who kind of taught me about her. And so she has a great TED Talk. And I think that was maybe what she had talked about during her TED Talk. So you can either find her there, or she's got a podcast. She's got books as well. She's awesome. And she's a huge fan of Ted Lasso. And so I think from listening to her podcast, I then started watching Ted Lasso during the pandemic. And that was one of the best gifts from television that I think we got during the pandemic.
Okay. Got you. Great info. How can people find you?
So I'm a pretty terrible millennial in that I don't use my social media platforms for the work that I'm doing. And maybe that's something that will change. But so, I have Facebook and Instagram, but those are for my personal stuff. So really, I think the best way to find me and what I'm doing is probably from the Paving the Path to Wellness website through Mass General Hospital. And so I think I shared that with you, and you can definitely share it with our listeners as well. But it's nice because it also has the bios on the other team members. And I feel bad. I totally miss talking about someone who's super important on our team, is Hannah Lee. She's our research coordinator, and she kind of like is the glue that holds the program together.
Okay, great. Yes, I will put it on the description of the podcast so people can find you that way. Is any 3 books you will recommend to the audience, and why?
Yes. Okay. So, and because I haven't heard Amy's talk, I wonder if she suggested this book, but it can't hurt to say it twice in case she suggests it too. Yeah. But it's her workbook. It's the Paving the Path to Wellness workbook. So it's a workbook that Dr. Amy Commander, Dr. Beth Frades, and Dr. Michelle Tollefson have published, and it's something that we use when we're going through the paving program. So it's a really wonderful workbook, and you can get it on Amazon. Another book that I think is great for patients, I sort of took that approach. I was like, I'm going to do the things that are good for patients. Then I have one that was, so another one that's good for patients it's called Living with Breast Cancer, the step-by-step guide to minimizing side effects and maximizing quality of life. And that's written by Dr. Jennifer Shin. And she's one of my physician colleagues. She's dual certified in palliative care and in medical oncology. So she has a really awesome approach to symptom management for patients going through breast cancer treatment. But it also speaks about the different tests that you're going to be going through, part of your workup. And it talks about sort of like early stage breast cancer, to like the later stages of breast cancer, and even to metastatic breast cancer. So it sort of prepares you for everything. I think that's a great tool for patients. And then I thought a cookbook, I mean, it's not a book that you read per se, but it's a really great resource. It's called Eat Well, Move Often, Stay Strong. And it was written by Renee Plodzik, and she is a breast cancer survivor and a nurse practitioner. And she actually could be a very interesting guest for a future podcast for you. She's really, she's an inspiration.
Okay. What's her name again?
Her name is Renee Plodzik. I can send it to you afterwards so you have her spelling. Yeah. Yeah. And then I think one of your other guests, they maybe were talking about Jay Shetty's podcast, but I really enjoyed Jay Shetty's book, Think Like a Monk. And then really anything by Dr. Atul Gawande, his articles and his books, they've all been really fantastic.
Okay, awesome. How about movies?
Movies. Okay. Well, we talked about my dog, Elton John, earlier. And so a lot of people are always like, why did you name him Elton John? So I'm a huge fan. I love Elton John's music, and so keeping in that vein, I love that movie Rocket Man. I think they did a really nice portrayal of Elton's earlier life, and it's just the idea is that we all want to be loved and we all deserve love, and the music is so fun and the costumes and everything. So I feel like it's a true movie. You feel like you're
Mhm.
taken out of whatever you're doing. Um, I also was thinking of the holiday season coming up, and I guess when I watch movies, I like to laugh, and so I love Will Ferrell for that. And so Elf is one of my favorite holiday movies. And then last year, he and Ryan Reynolds came out with one called Spirited, and they dance, they sing, it's really silly and fun to laugh. Um, and then this one is like a sentimental recommendation for me is I love the director Pedro Almodovar. So
Okay.
he's a Spanish director, and I it's sort of sentimental for me because when I was living in Spain for that year in college, I went to go see his movie called Volver, and Penelope Cruz is the lead actress in it. And I thought it was so cool because I was in the movie theater in Spain and there weren't any subtitles, but I understood what was happening in the movie. So it just felt so, I was so proud of myself. I was like, I
Nice.
understand what they're saying. Yeah.
We can
And he's,
maybe we can do this podcast again in Spanish when I start to produce them in Spanish.
see, perfecto, see. Yeah, so his movies are wonderful and they always have, typically have like a female lead in them. So those would be my recommendations.
Great. And then how about podcasts? And you already mentioned one.
Yes, I already mentioned one. Well, yours has just been so awesome. I've been listening to it on like road trips and when I walk to work, and I need to start, recommending it to more of my patients
Thank
because I think
you.
you really picked some great guests. And I mean, they really make me think too. And so it's been really, really fantastic.
Thank you.
Um, there is someone I played lacrosse in college for a couple years, and one of my teammates, her sister-in-law, unfortunately was diagnosed with breast cancer at a very young age. And so I think it was maybe last year, she made a podcast and she interviewed cancer survivors and it's all breast cancer related typically. And so her podcast is called the Don't Call It a Journey podcast. And I really liked that because I think just like you, she's very intentional about the people that she's reaching out to and asking to come join her show. So I really liked that one. And it's hers was a limited amount of podcasts. So it's not like you're taking on, hundreds of episodes.
Uh-huh.
And then a patient recommended this one to me, and it's called Bouncing Forward with Amy Purdy. And it is really a fantastic podcast about resilience. So Amy, I don't want to get this wrong because unfortunately I haven't listened to it in a while, but Amy ended up as she's a double amputee, and I believe that her operations were done here in Boston. But it really hasn't slowed Amy down, and so there's the saying it's like oh you're going to bounce back from your cancer treatment or whatever. She's using it as bouncing forward, and so it's sort of like her journey going through the surgeries, but then also, being resilient and taking back the things that were important to her, including, I believe she was a pretty good snowboarder. So that's a wonderful recommendation that a patient passed on to me.
That's great. So, every time I ask these questions, I have a list of like podcasts, books, movies. It's like, when do I have the time to actually listen to all of it? So I try to do the same thing, like when I go to work or working out or something or doing some documentation, try to like, okay, let me do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So
Yeah.
yes, so that was really good option. So is one question you wish I would have asked you and will you have answered?
Yeah. So I thought a good one might have been like, Dina, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, so that I can sort of like talk about what are my hopes and dreams related to, taking care of patients. So I have always been super interested in survivorship, but more the nonprofit side of it too. And so um, I would love to be able to open up like a brick and mortar survivorship center for patients. And I think I'm practicing in a location that might be perfect for that. Being in Boston, where we have access to a lot of great medical care, a lot of big cancer centers. So the idea of a brick and mortar place where cancer survivors and their families can go and maybe would have a kitchen where a nutritionist is there helping to prepare healthy food, like a sort of a test kitchen. And then maybe we could have a room where it's a gym and there's physical therapists that are there that are sort of like helping patients that have gone through surgeries and other treatments and saying like, all right, we're going to modify these exercises based on where you are in your recovery. Or like a resource room where there's all these great books and things that cancer patients can, you know, have access to so that they can sort of like help pave their way forward. So that's what I'm hopeful for. I also have learned, though, I think I've been saying that's my 5 or 10 year plan for 5 to 10 years at this point. And so unfortunately, I haven't made good progress because I have the passion, I have the clinical practice to sort of back it up, but I don't have the business experience side of things. So if anybody's out there listening and they have that piece that I'm missing, let's partner together, let's make it happen. But I also recognize like there's really great nonprofits that are already out there, and so maybe my way is to sort of you know, piggyback on some of the important work that other people are doing, and not always reinventing the wheel.
That's amazing. And I'm just so happy that again, people start thinking beyond that, right? Sometimes, you know, it's like, what else can we do to help? And sometimes when we are in like the situation I am, it's like sometimes I just see this patient through treatment and then they're done with treatment, but they're not done with a lot of the sequelas and a lot of the secondary effects. They just continue having to kind of get their back life. And sometimes they're kind of lost, like, you know, I'm really feeling well, but how do I get back into my normal life prior to it? How do I get there? So it's great to have something like that. And sometimes you just don't have the resources to be able to do it. Then yes, you can go to this nutritionist, but that's going to cost me money. You can join to this gym, but it's going to cost me money. So that's a great thing where you're thinking to do like a nonprofit where people can have all this access to it. That's great. So yes, I'll be keeping an eye for you. So I can start to really promote it with everybody else. So yes.
I also, this isn't a question, but it's more of like Billy, I think we need to hear from you. I think we need to have somebody ask you these questions and get the tables turned, because I think you've done such a good job, you know, guiding these conversations. But it's important for us to know, like, you know, why did you decide to do the podcast? And I don't know, that's what I'm asking for in the future.
No, that's great. And I think I have somebody else who just asked me this not long ago. And I'm like, oh, that's very good. So I kind of start thinking of the idea of, I think that patient needs to get this education. And I want them to know it's not just the surgeon, it's not just the medical oncologist, it's not just the radiation oncologist. It's so many pieces to the puzzle that I wanted to bring everybody that can help to those pieces to the puzzle. So I kind of just start like, you know, following people, and I'm like, okay, there will be a really good, you know, somebody really good that can bring a lot of value to my patients, and then this connected with this. And it's like, what about mental health? What about, you know, people who goes through menopause? And we just, you know, I have one of the interviews was, she's a pharmacist talking about all these supplements and things like that that can help with menopause symptoms and sleep better and start feeling better, even though you cannot take, you know, hormone replacement anymore, but you've been thrown into menopause, or you already in menopause, and on top of that, you having all these hormone blockers. So I start to kind of really looking into what else can be great value for patients. And then when I just start to present it, patients was just loving it. And then I just really enjoying like learning so much from each one of you, you know, like every single time I do one, it's just so like meeting people like you that is so passionate about what we do for the patient. So it's not like, you know, we do this because we just go get paid for it, right? And it is really a very passionate and enjoyable job to do it every day. And then I just been kind of like, even I was not really like you're busy on your 40 hours a week work. And then sometimes I just mention with some of the patients, oh, I have this podcast, and somebody like, why you are not sharing that podcast with everybody? And I'm like, you know what? I think you're right. So I started just really talking to patients, and they're like giving me great ideas, like, you know, what has been your pains? What is your frustrations? What can I do to find value for you? So that's kind of the whole thing kind of a start. And I'm like, oh, let's see how that works. You know, it's like in the beginning, I was a little bit shy about it. You know, English is not my first language. I'm original from Colombia, so I'm like, okay, it's gonna be an accent to it, but who cares, I think I've been in here too long, so it's okay with my accent. And then just really, I've been really thoroughly enjoy it. It has been really fun just to get to know each one of you and learn so much from each one of you. So that has been really great. So yeah, so that's the whole idea. So it's kind of trying to continue building this app and hopefully as well try to kind of build like a some help with their cancer journey. How can we just be more proactive and kind of show them different things to try to help themselves to just continue getting their life back, no matter what kind of cancer it is. I didn't want to do it just for press. I didn't want to do it. So I just wanted to try to kind of bring it more abroad because it's a lot of similar things, just a little different flavor on each cancer, but can be very helpful for everyone. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this for your patients and for us.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for being here. Super enjoyed this conversation and I really appreciate it.
It's been so fun.
All right, you have a great evening.
You as well. And we can do this in Spanish whenever you like.
Absolutely, that's the next step. Okay, you take care, okay? Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.